make sure everybody gets an opportunity to contribute. So I am going to do a quick introduction to our students that we have working with 100 Real Women, and we'll get this webinar started. So why don't we start out? Alexis, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining from today?
Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Minnesota Morris. I'm zooming in from my off-campus apartment, and I'm an intern for 100 Rural Women, and I'll be monitoring some of the Q&A today.
Okay, Jasmine, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. Hi, I am Jasmine Terry. I use she, her pronouns. I am a graduate research assistant for 100 Rural Women. I go to the University of Minnesota, so I'm here in Minneapolis right now. And I actually started with 100 Rural Women about 2 years ago when I was an undergrad. I graduated, got into grad school, and then saw that they had a position for a graduate student. So now I'm here and I just cannot get enough of 100 Rural Women. So I'm going to kind of introduce 100 Rural Women, who we are, and then what we're doing this morning. So 100 Rural Women, we create connections and inspire leadership. 100 Rural Women sees a future where more rural women lead positive change for themselves, their families, and communities, the nation, and the world. We're committed to building leadership through networks, mentorship, education, and civic engagement. Our organization is a nonprofit and nonpartisan, and our mission is to serve and support rural women. So this morning, we're at our 100 Rural Women Breakfast Club. And this webinar series actually began when we were heading into COVID so that we could lift up the work of rural women leaders, share resources with each other, network, and continue to develop as leaders. All of our programs seek to lift up, connect, and learn from one another. So welcome to our 100 Rural Women Breakfast Club this morning. I just want to go over quick Zoom basics before we fully dive in. So just make sure everyone is muted so we can hear the speakers well today. And then if you have any questions throughout the time, we will have a Q&A at the end, but you can throw them in the chat as we're going so you don't forget them. Alexis will keep track of them. And make sure you're sharing resources or clicking on any resource links we're putting in the chat. They're super awesome. And this meeting is recorded, so if you need to hop off early or you know someone that's interested in watching it, that will be put on our website. So thank you so much for coming. Teresa, I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jasmine, and thanks, Alexis. And I'm excited today to be able to do an introduction here. And we are so excited to have these speakers with us today. And I want to introduce Christine Metzo, who's the program manager for the Initiative Foundation's Fellowship Program here. And Christine joined the Initiative Foundation in August of 22 as a program manager for the fellowship. She previously worked at St. Cloud State University as a director of first year and transfer experience, leading mentoring, coaching, educational programs for new students, including programs focused on equity, inclusion, and belonging. Christine's worked in higher ed for 20 plus years, but is excited about the opportunities and challenges of working with social entrepreneurs in greater Minnesota. And we're so happy to have Christine with us today. And Christine, I'm going to hand it over to you to do the honors of the intros of our presenters. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Teresa. I am so delighted to be accompanied here today by 3 of our Initiator Fellows who have really diverse projects. We have 2 who are in our current cohort, and we have 1 alum of the fellowship. So I'm excited for her to have a chance to be able to share a little bit about the impact of that experience on her in the current conditions of her business. So we're joined by Fardosa Iman, who is one of our current fellows, and Chris Shellstad, again, a current fellow, and Ann O'Keefe Jackson. And I'm going to let them do a little bit of self-introduction, a little bit about their background and where they come from. So Ferdosa, could we start with you?
Yes. Hi, my name is Ferdosa, and I am from St. Cloud. I've lived here for 20 years now. And do I talk about my social enterprise now, or just?
I think we can do a quick just bio introduction, and then you can talk about your social enterprise. I'll ask you to do that now.
Okay. And I'm a licensed alcohol drug counselor. I wanted to be in the field because I realized my community was struggling when I was in school, and I saw my peers struggling. And I knew that they needed to be somebody that looks like them, that understands the culture, but also understands, obviously, treatment and what it's needed, and blends the two. Pass it off.
Thanks, Ferdosa. Chris.
Yes, hello. I'm Chris Shelstead. I'm coming to you from Madison, Minnesota, from the utility room. And I just spilled coffee on my computer. So it's an occupational hazard because we have a coffee house and an art gallery and a community center here. So my social enterprise is building a space for people to access art, culture, innovation, entrepreneurship, and anything else my tiny little town needs. It sounds like a big mission, and it is, but it's a lot of fun. I'm in the second year of the current fellowship, and it's been fabulous so far.
And Chris has come home to Madison from a long time living away from Minnesota. So she's what we would describe as a rural rebounder.
Yes, a rural rebounder. I should have put that in. I am back in my hometown, which 40 years ago, I would not have anticipated that. But now I am, I'm excited to be here and I'm loving it.
Thanks, Chris. Ann, if you want to give us a little background about yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Good to see everyone. I'm Ann O'Keefe Jackson. I'm Dakota. I'm a member of the Lower Sioux community here in Morton, Minnesota. So my social enterprise is Minnesota Arts. So it's a Native arts organization, nonprofit. And it's really about helping support artists, not just selling their work, but actually supporting the artists themselves on what they need and how they can help flourish. To have a better connection to themselves and to their community. So glad to be here today. Thank you.
Great, thanks. If you could each talk a little bit about your social enterprise and the impact that you expected to have, and that for Chris and Ann, as you're already launched in your businesses, that you're seeing the impact of your business. We'll go around again, starting with Ferdosa.
So my social enterprise is an addiction and mental health clinic that's culturally competent, faith-based, and trauma-informed. As I was working as an addiction counselor, I realized, one, that our faith and our culture were not being utilized in treatment or even to help our patients sustain their recovery as well. So I realized, even in college, prior to even me working, that within my community, there was just a lot of substance and mental health, and our parents really did not know how to deal with it. They would most of the time send us back home in hopes that a change in environment would cure us, but it never really obviously worked out that way. Kids will come back, or adults will come back more traumatized and pick up exactly where they left off. And I wanted a better solution than just sending them back home. And when I was in school, I realized I was already in the psychology field, but I had to pick a major, and then I ended up kind of landing on alcohol. What is it called? Licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And I thought it was the greatest fit because it took what I knew from psychology, but also like what I knew my community will need, not just now, but like in the future. And what I thought came to fruition, unfortunately, that the longer our communities are in the West, the longer that they have struggles that they don't know how to deal with, will use substances or other forms to deal with their mental health or substance use. And I wanted to create something different. I wanted to create an option for my community, and I wanted to create options for individuals that grew up here, and being taken back home would cause a lot more trauma and a lot more problems than just going back home to visit. And that's where this board was born out of. And I knew that our religion plays such a big role in our day-to-day life, that not being used in treatment is such a disservice to that individual. Is like treating half the person and not the whole person. And I wanted to create a more holistic way of doing it. And I also, being in the field, understood that it was just a revolving door of people coming in and out of treatment, and their real problems were not being dealt with, which usually stem from traumatic events in their lives. So I want to create a clinic that utilizes our culture and our religion, but also uses best practices when it comes to multidisciplinary team, having like teaching coping skills within the treatment, versus asking the patients to try it outside and like try to get them to do it, engage in things when they're already struggling. It's harder for them to engage in things that are going to be positive when we can just start it with them at the clinic. And also I want to create a residential, because Central Minnesota, in this whole area, there's no residential treatment option. There's a lot of outpatient, but there's no residential treatment. And in the state, like in Central Minnesota, there's about 16,000 Somali individuals living in the Central Minnesota area, and there's no culturally competent clinic within this area. There's some in the cities, but there's only like 2 or 3. And just imagine the whole population that is in the state of Minnesota trying to be served by just 2 clinics. It's not efficient, and I want to give a different option.
Thanks so much, Verdosa. Chris, do you want to share again a little bit about your enterprise and what you hope for impact and the impact you're already seeing?
Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Great job, Verdosa. It's one thing we do in the fellowship is similar to 100 Rural Women. We like to, what did you say, lift up and connect. So I, as Christine mentioned, I moved back here to my hometown after being gone for a long time. During that time, I lived all over the United States and overseas. I was in the military for a big chunk of that. So I moved back home when my husband passed away, and I wanted to be closer to my family, who are here in Madison and Dawson and the upper Minnesota River regional area. So I was home for about 6 months, and I started to get a little bit antsy and saw this giant building was empty, and I went ahead and bought it and decided to bring everything into the space that I was missing. So my initial impetus for doing it was purely just because I missed good coffee. I missed art. I missed a little bit of culture and music and craft beer, and I missed connecting with people that I had developed that kind of group when I lived outside of Austin, Texas. So I missed that connection. I was also reading a lot of books about how divided communities are. It was in the middle of COVID. And what I saw in my little community was, and there's only 1,500 people in my town, less than 10,000 people in the county. I saw that people were moving back here during COVID. They were bringing their jobs with them. And they were used to things like a coffee shop and to music on a Saturday night and things like that. So I thought, well, there's no reason we can't have that here. So the kind of the impetus really for starting it all was selfish, but then I realized the rest of the community needed and wanted these things as well. So we just basically started working on the building and said yes to everything that came along. The first thing was a quilt club, and then a book club, and then Narcotics Anonymous, and you name it. We've got over a dozen organizations that use the space now as their meeting space. Again, because of COVID, nobody wanted 20 people in their living room. Here you could spread out a little bit. So fast forward, that was 2 years ago. Fast forward to now, we have a working coffee house. You can get a latte in our little town now, and I'm kind of surprised at the 85-year-old men who've discovered retired farmers who've discovered that lattes are a good thing in their later life. So it's great. We've had a good following. So we have a coffee house, an art gallery, a music stage, artist studios, offices. We've got a co-working space that we're building out right now, which will have a computer digital literacy lab, including a video teleconferencing space. We've got a wellness room for exercise, group exercise, yoga and things like that. And we've got a space that we're developing into a local foods co-op. We're working with partners like Land Stewardship Project to make that food co-op a reality. And we're working with our county mental health and our social services folks to build out the things that our community needs. So we kind of did a informal gap analysis on everything we needed here, and we're trying to fill those gaps. We've been very lucky in that the city and the townsfolk and the regional people have been really supportive. I couldn't ask for a better climate, basically. It was sorely needed, and everybody's really jumped in to support what we're doing. Let's see, what else? We've just recently reorganized, and this is where I'd like to bring in some of the resources from the Initiative Foundation, what the impact of being in the fellowship is for me, and thus for my community. They helped me realize, first of all, they validated my idea, which was so important. I wasn't crazy. And that was more important than you'd think, to have a group of people around you who say, you know what, that sounds like it's doable, lifting up and connecting again. And the fellowship was instrumental in helping me understand what my structure really needed to be, helping me access some legal resources and some business resources that helped me build my foundation. I'm not quite there yet, but we recently reorganized to become an overall nonprofit instead of a conglomeration of 100 different things happening under one roof. So the fellowship and the people, fellowship and the people that sorry about my phone. The fellowship and the people that they connected us to really helps make us successful. Moving, I'm so sorry. Moving our ideas from a dream to reality, and that's I think the most important thing, and doing it in such a way that it's sustainable in the future. So I thank all the folks at the fellowship for that. And as an impact on my community, I am amazed how many people have kind of caught the fire of what we're doing. There's this group of folks who are trying to do some beautification downtown because they said, you know, we're gonna follow your lead. We're gonna paint our building. We're gonna make it look good. We're gonna start an arts council. We're gonna start this diversity council. So there's been a number of things that have been spawned by our efforts. So it really is kind of a rural renaissance that we're sparking. And I don't think any of this would have happened this quickly or in this way if it were not for the Initiator Fellowship. So I would encourage folks to anybody who's got an idea for a social enterprise to apply for the fellowship. It's open right now. Yes, you get a stipend, you get access to resources and things like that, but what you really get is people like 100 rural women who have a hope and optimism and ideas for the future, and connecting to them is so valuable. I could go on and on, can't I, Christine? So I should probably
thanks, Chris.
Stop, make sure my phone is off. Sorry about that.
I'll let Anne introduce her enterprise. But after Anne's done her introduction of her enterprise, I'll talk a little bit more about what is entailed in the fellowship, and give you a little overview of what the goals are, what a social enterprise is, and also what we're looking for in this application cycle. So a little more on that in a sec. But Anne, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thanks. So just quickly, so Minnesota Art. So when I actually started the fellowship, it was just more of a concept and idea. So really helping with hone in the legalities of creating the nonprofit. Along with that, also created a LLC of a food truck to help support the nonprofit. So we do events, different, especially currently a lot of powwows, since we've really only been in operation for this last year when post-COVID. So we have a tiny little art bus So we would bring artist supplies around. So not so much selling works, more so of like selling supplies and things that are needed for artists, things that are hard to find, traditionally brain tanned hides, porcupine quill work, things that are not readily available everywhere. Then also one of the kind of interesting thing that we figured out is working with Native authors and books. And that was also a big draw, and we were able to connect that way as well. So and currently working on finding space to actually have a physical area and gallery space as well. So that's kind of where we're working at. So I'll send it back to you, Chris, so that we can keep moving on. Thanks.
So thanks all of you for a little bit of an overview of your projects. Those of you on the call might be wondering, what do these women have in common? And that is that idea of a social enterprise. So in each case, there's a social-based mission, and a social-based mission could be environmental in nature, and it could be more about social welfare and community, but all of them have at the heart of the business something that community, and it's really baked in not just to kind of a charitable arm, but into the structure of the business itself. That's what makes something a social enterprise. So the fellowship was really a brainchild of some central Minnesota community and business leaders asking themselves the question, how do we promote and encourage rural revitalization? We want our rural communities to be healthy and vibrant. Our rural communities are changing. Some are getting smaller. There's a lot of out-migration. Some are gaining size, but the in-migration has a different dynamic than it used to have. So how do we create communities that foster a real sense of belonging and inclusion, and really be livable communities for those who live there, and attract more people to live there? So as Chris was talking about Madison, Minnesota, and all the people moving back to rural, away from the hustle and bustle of the city life, there's a hunger for that feel to your pace of life, but without the amenities, it can be really challenging. So the fellowship was created and designed to think about supporting innovative entrepreneurs who have this goal at the heart of their business model, to do something that lifts up their community or communities. And community here is not necessarily defined as just a town. It can be more regional. It can be a population within the community, a demographic population. Fardosa's project, of course, is looking at Somali immigrants and the challenges of being Somali immigrants in central Minnesota. But it has reached beyond central Minnesota, if done successfully, which I know Fardosa will. So that's the community here is really how you define community, but kind of based and at its heart, centered in rural Minnesota. And so how do we get the opportunity for these emerging entrepreneurs to be supported in being successful entrepreneurs, but also tapping into their natural leadership capacity to build and develop rural leaders in their communities? So in terms of the program and what we do for our fellows, we have really wraparound support for that enterprise development, tapping into whatever business consulting they need. That might be legal consulting, that might be real business basics, it might be nonprofit basics if it's a nonprofit structure, but it really taps into giving you a 2-year timeline for that training and growth and development. There's some pretty basic training at the beginning of the fellowship 2-year cycle, but as the fellowship grows and the cohort develops, it becomes very customized to the needs of that cohort. And so it's really responsive support that you get. You also receive an individual mentor who is in the industry or an aligned industry, who can really, what is a mentor but someone who speaks from their experience to really guide and support you. They're both a cheerleader and someone who knows where you are and where you're going and where you want to go. And that's so critical in small communities where you might be the only person doing what you're doing. Having someone else in outstate Minnesota who can talk to you about what you're going through is really crucial. I frequently say being an entrepreneur is hard. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes big risk and challenges people. Being a rural entrepreneur, because you're not surrounded by other entrepreneurs, is that much harder. But being a social entrepreneur in rural Minnesota is yet another level of hard, because there's not a lot of small businesses that have that social-based mission and dispersed across the state. We don't have communities where you might have someone right next door to lean into as a social entrepreneur. So we really try to connect our folks to a network of resources around Greater Minnesota and across the Twin Cities Metro, where we have some connections to give them a robust community of support that they can tap into. So not just the mentor, but and consultants, but just that network of other folks that they can see their work reflected in the work of those other entrepreneurs and the agencies that provide support across the state. So the 2-year life cycle of the fellowship also gives them the support of each other. And I think Chris and Fardosa can speak to the cohort model and the cohort they're in terms of the bond that's connected, and can speak to her cohort and the bonds they made. There's something really special about those folks that you're going through this experience with having your back, right? They're the people who you can turn to and say anything to. They will get it. They will help you see the positive in what's happening, because we often overlook our wins. And so celebrating each other, supporting each other, and that it's just a really great model for our folks. So we expect a lot in this 2-year cycle in terms of time. And so that is compensated with a stipend. But as Chris said, that's really not the main piece of the fellowship. It does help, obviously, to know that you can, if you need to quit a 9-to-5 job so that you can really focus on the enterprise, that stipend can help you start to make that move. If you just need to scale back your workload, go part-time, you can do that in order to focus on your business. If you are in the business and not turning over yet enough to make a salary, a living wage yet, again, that stipend can help. So it's about accelerating the enterprise and really committing to the enterprise. And that involves a lot of work from our fellows. So I can talk a little bit more in the Q&A if people have questions about that. But I want to turn us back to our 3 wonderful entrepreneurs here to share a little bit more about their experience. And the question we have is, are there challenges or opportunities that you've faced so far that you would describe as unique to being female entrepreneurs or leaders? Or are there challenges or opportunities that have been unique because you're starting a social enterprise or being in rural Minnesota? So you can focus on any or all of those areas. And I think maybe we'll go in reverse order and start with Anne this time.
Okay. Well, just quickly, I think it's just a challenge for women in general. I know even for myself at the fellowship as being, I had, when I started the fellowship, I had a 2-year-old foster child that took up a lot of my time as well. And I also continue to work for my tribe. I'm the HR director for our tribal enterprise for our casino. And so those were still things that were really important to me. And so I would have to say that's a challenge. That was the biggest challenge, is trying to divide my time up. Definitely, if I didn't have the support of the fellowship, I think I would have to give the fellowship or the business idea up altogether, because I just wouldn't be able to manage that effort on my own. So it worked out really well. I mean, I'm still in my position, still supporting my community, and I still, our daughter's still with us. She's 5 years old. So but just really being able to help structure those priorities, help get the support. So I think that's the biggest challenge, like all women, of how do you do all this? How do you continue to support your family, support what you have to do to pay the bills, and then have this opportunity to really follow your own dreams and your own passions. And so I think that'd be the challenge that was for me.
Thanks so much, Anne. Chris, do you want to share one?
I think I'm trying to focus this on being a female in this realm. I think everybody who's from a small town knows that there's a handful of people that run that small town, and they're mostly men. So I think that was a little bit of a challenge, was for them to take me seriously, and because a lot of it was, hey, I'm going to do this huge social enterprise thing, and they looked at me like I was a bit crazy, and how are you going to monetize that? How are you going to make money? And when I said that wasn't the point, they all kind of thought, isn't that the point of having a quote business? So I think part of it was just gaining their trust and support, I guess. This is the way we've always run the town. This is what we do. These are the people in charge, and sort of breaking that paradigm a little bit by just kind of bursting into the room and not asking for permission, just saying, going to the city council and saying, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not asking you for anything yet. This is the year of the ask. Last year, I just wanted to prove I had skin in the game, and that it was a real thing that we were doing. It wasn't just a pipe dream. So I think kind of breaking into the sort of hierarchy of how a small town is run and who does what, and shaking that up. I'm lucky in that I'm from here. My grandparents were from here. I think it gets exponentially harder if you're not considered being from there. So I think that it's a very can be a very insulated and closed society, the management of a small town or region, and not everybody reacts to change well, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway.
Thanks, Chris.
But having the support of other women doing this kind of thing is really key.
Thanks. Verdosa?
I think for me, it's really dealing with the imposter syndrome a lot. Being a young Black woman in a lot of spaces, I feel very like I don't belong, and having to sometimes speak to men that are a lot older than me that might not even sometimes understand what I'm doing, not in just like the greater community, but within my community as well. When I talk about mental health, think of like the somatic community as like in the 40s and 50s, like that's where we are socially. So a lot of the times when I'm talking about like mental health and trauma and how these things affect you as a person, I almost have to like educate and fight back sometimes. So like it's even a pull where I'm just trying to educate and like tell my community that there's options and these are the symptoms, and like mental health is very new to our community in the sense of like before we used to just say it's spirits, is this, there wasn't like, oh, there's a diagnosis, there's this and this, but there's also like options of treatment and medication and all that stuff. So I do a lot of like educating and also like dispelling myths in my community. But then I also, when I go into like spaces of business and things like that, I just sometimes feel like I don't belong. But I also have to remind myself that yes, I do. There's a reason why I am in these rooms, and there's a reason why my idea was chosen. But I've realized that that's a lot of things that a lot of women just in general deal with, is being in spaces and having like imposter syndrome. And I dealt with this in my career as well prior to even, is just, I think, me being a woman in spaces that are very new to me, and in spaces sometimes when people are asking me for my advice or like my opinion on things, and I'm uniquely qualified to give advice, but I also still feel like I don't, and I don't have the expertise even though I do. So it's just a lot of fighting back on, yes, I do belong, and yes, I do have the expertise to speak on these topics. I'm uniquely qualified to actually speak in these topics. So it's just a reminder constantly to keep reminding myself that what what my mission and what I want to accomplish and the impact I want to make on my community is more important than me feeling anxious in situations. So I just keep reminding myself of that all the time.
Thanks so much, Verdosa. The next question and the last structured question we have is, how do you think women can better support one another in your quests to start businesses, take on local leadership, and create positive change in community? So how can women support each other in this endeavor? Verdosa, do you want to start?
I was reading something, so I was reading a question. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah.
Brain.
So how do you think women can better support one another in your quests to start businesses, take on local leadership, and create positive change in your communities?
I think one is a lot of us women have great ideas, but we feel like we don't or shouldn't put them out there. I can speak for my community. Like, I even know a lot of women that have the most amazing ideas on how to fix things, but we don't put ourselves out there enough. That's the first thing. Even for me personally, I've had this idea since I was in college in 2011. And it took until I I had a partner, and I told the partner to apply for the fellowship, and they couldn't, and I applied for it personally myself with the idea and everything. And getting that feedback of like your idea is actually like a good idea and also can make a great impact was such a good thing for me, that I think that sharing our ideas with other women to get positive feedback, with feedback in general, on your ideas, a really good one. But also like mentoring and programs like this. I not wish, but I wish there was programs that were just for women to help them become entrepreneurs, because I do feel like there's things that we deal with as women that men entrepreneurs don't end up having to deal with, and having to navigate those stressors, and how to like not let those microaggressions or little things that happen to you really get you to the point of just giving up on your idea or giving up on your thing. So I do think just sharing ideas, mentorship, and like also like programs that are like this that have the funding to support those ideas. Because I also think that the Initiative Fellowship gave me a time to just take a step back and not to worry so much about like making money, where I don't think if I had to have a job and do this, that this would have been off the ground or even at the stage that it is right now, which I'm super, super, super grateful for. So idea sharing, mentors, and like funding, and like just giving women the opportunity to not have to do job and home. So I've been a part-time mom for my sister since she's been on vacation, and it gives you all moms the biggest props on earth, because having to work and be a mom, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Thanks, Verdosa. And did you want to share some thoughts on how women can support each other through these challenges?
Well, I wrote some stuff down, but I was thinking, and it sounds a little crude, but like to really raise inclusive men or people, because I feel like we're still fighting for the same couple of spaces all the time. So that competitiveness between women all the time for, the few spaces that are available. And I still see it on jobs and pay. There's still such inequality that, and access, that it still blows my mind. So I know there's nothing but women out here raising these young men. So, if we really put some effort to consciously being aware of that, but I think but also really just showing up for each other too, for events, or, even sometimes it doesn't have to be that you can buy or support somebody financially, but really just showing up for them, coming to support them at their events or their openings or galleries, or help promote their work online. I think that makes a huge difference. And so just to feel supported, and yeah, like this organization as well, where you really bring awareness to what women are doing and how you can support and be a part of that.
Thanks, Anne. Love that. Chris?
ditto what they both said. But the thing that that I'm kind of working on in myself is reaching out to people that are younger than me and trying to establish some intergenerational, some friendships with people who are Alexis's age and Jasmine's age and stuff, to give me, and Fardosa, of course. Not that the rest of us are old, but I just, I hadn't had that opportunity much in the past. I don't have children of my own, so I didn't have that, relationship with younger people as much as maybe some of you have. But I'm making that kind of a point of order around here, that when we do something, I don't want just gray-haired people at the table. I really want to include some younger people who are the leaders of the future in our community. And some people, there's a lot of young families moved back to town during COVID, and they have bigger ideas of what life should be like, and they have energy to give. And yes, they've got little kids and they're very busy and all that, but as we all know, when you want something done, reach out to somebody who's busy, because they'll find a way to do it, right? So I think that's kind of my focus right now, is to develop friendships, relationships, and hopefully mentorships with some of the younger young women in town here. And we've already seen a few that have kind of found their passion because they started hanging out here at the Mercantile. They found like-minded people. There's one group that started that is all women who are interested in climate change, soil health, sustainability, and they all thought that they were unicorns out here. They didn't realize there was a whole group of them, and they formed as a result of having this space to meet. And most of them, and not all of them, are working women with children or people who have raised families here. So I love seeing the relationships build between the older and younger folks that utilize our space, and I want to be part of that. I think that's important.
Thanks, Chris. All wonderful suggestions for how to support other women in entrepreneurship and business and life, right? So I appreciate all of those responses. So now we're open for questions. We've got a little bit of time here, and Alexis is gonna share messages that she's gotten with questions, but feel free to raise your hands, I think, and ask away.
Yeah.